What's up guys, Perry from Rockville here, and today I'm going to teach you how to set up your CT80 8-inch 70-volt commercial subwoofer. This is the perfect addition to add the low-end frequencies to your 70-volt system for any restaurants, conference rooms, or any other commercial applications. So as you can see, it comes with the subwoofer itself, and we can either place it on the floor or hang it up to your wall. And if you decide to hang it up to your wall, it comes with all of the mounting pieces and a wrench to do so. And if you do decide to hang the subwoofer onto your wall, the feet at the bottom are removable, but this is completely optional. You'll also notice that the speaker is a down-firing sub, so you can see the 8-inch speaker here at the bottom. And there's also a port on the top, so you get more presence and a tighter bass response on top of the low end coming out of the sub. Now before we dive into the setup, let me quickly explain how 70-volt systems work. 70-volt amplifiers allow you to run a large amount of speakers at a fixed and constant wattage off of that 1 amp. For example, you could run over 100 speakers off 1 amp if you match the watts being drawn by the speakers to the ability of the amp. We can do that by tapping each speaker at a specific watt amount. So another example, if my amp has 100 watts, I can tap each speaker at 5 watts, giving me the ability to use 20 speakers. Now if we use a multi-zone amplifier, that opens up the flexibility of where we can control the audio and how we can set it up in our space. But the same principles apply. You have to match the tapped wattage of your speakers to the recommended wattage amounts of each zone, and you'll be good to go. And with this kind of setup, you'll have the independent volume control of the speakers in each zone. If you want to learn even more about 70-volt technology, check out our video, What is 70-volt? Now on the back of the sub, you'll see we have options of what wattage we can tap it at for either 70-volt or 100-volt amps. So you can tap the sub at either 10, 20, or 40 watts when you're using a 70-volt amp, or you can tap it at 15, 25, or 55 watts when you're using a 100-volt amp. And we also have the option to run the sub at 4 ohms with a 4 ohm stable amp or receiver. So now let me show you guys how to connect your sub to your 70-volt amp. Alright, so here I have my 70-volt amp and my 2 speakers that I'm going to be using with my sub. Now the 2 speakers are already connected into each of their zones, so now I'm going to connect my sub into its own zone. To do that, I'm going to take a speaker wire, I'm going to take the positive end and plug it into the positive 70-volt terminal here on the sub. Then I'm going to connect the negative end into the negative or common terminal on the sub. We can also connect our wires into this banana connector here to plug it into the sub. So now I can take the other end of the cable and plug it into one of the available zones on my amp. Today I'll use zone 3, and I'll take the positive wire and plug that into the positive terminal of my zone. And then I'll take the negative wire and plug that into the negative terminal of my zone. So now I'll use a screwdriver to tighten the terminals here on my amp. So the cool thing about this setup is that because I have each speaker connected to its own zone, it means I have independent volume control of each speaker. So I'm about to play some music right now from the speakers, and then I'll bring the sub in to really hear the difference. Okay. Again, this is without the sub in the mix. I'll bring it in right now. Yeah. Really hear that low end now, that bass guitar. Really cool. Sounds really nice. Now we can also connect the sub to a chain of speakers through parallel wiring, so let me show you how to do that next. Alright, so here I have all of my speakers that I'm going to connect to my amp through parallel wiring. And parallel wiring is very easy to do. It just means we're going to daisy chain each speaker together through our speaker wire and connect the positive and negative terminals of each speaker all the way down till we hit our amp. So to start, I'm going to take my first speaker wire and start the chain from my sub to my first speaker. And again, we'll take the positive end, plug it into the positive terminal on the sub. Then we'll take the negative wire and plug that into the negative terminal on our sub. So then I'm just going to take the other end and do the same exact thing on my speaker. I'm going to take the positive wire and plug that into the positive terminal. And then I'm going to take the negative wire and plug that into the negative terminal. So now to connect to the next speaker, I'm going to do the same exact thing. Take another speaker wire, plug the positive end into the first speaker, and then connect the negative end into the negative terminal. So then we're gonna do the same exact thing and plug the positive end to the positive terminal on the new speaker. Then we're gonna plug the negative wire into the negative terminal. And finally, we'll connect our speakers to the amp by taking one more speaker wire. You plug the positive into the positive and the negative into the negative. And then you'll take the other end of that wire and plug it into either a zone on your amp or into the direct output terminals. Today we'll use the direct output terminals. So now that we've got everything connected, let's hear how it sounds. Nice. Works without a hitch. Oh yeah. Now the cool thing about this setup is that we can mix and match our speakers, whether they be for your ceiling or your standard speakers, as long as they work with your 70 volt or 100 volt amp. Now, as I mentioned before, we can hang our speaker up to our wall using the included mounting bracket. So you'll want to start by taking your swivel mount plate and use the four corners here to mark where your screws or anchors are going to go to hold the mount to your wall. Now, if you're planning on mounting your subwoofer into a stud on your wall, you can just screw your screws directly into the stud. However, if you're mounting your sub onto sheetrock, we recommend you use screws and anchors for a secure mount, and we recommend you use this drill bit size for that. So now you'll want to assemble your swivel bracket by taking the bracket base here and sliding that into the swivel bracket itself. Then you'll want to use the included bolts to secure the two pieces together. You'll want to be sure to have the washer pieces on the outside of the bracket and have these two pieces in the middle to be fed through with your bolt. Next, you'll want to add these nut pieces to hold your bolts in place, and then you'll want to use the included wrench here along with a pair of pliers or another wrench to hold your bolt in place while you use the wrench to tighten up your nut. And be sure to set the bracket however you want it before tightening it up completely. So now we can attach all of these assembled pieces to the back of the sub. To do that, we can loosen these four screws here on the back of the sub, line up the four corners of the bracket here to the four holes on the back of the sub, and then put the screws back into the four holes to hold the bracket in place. So now we'll want to take the mounting plate and line it up to the four holes that we drilled in before, and use four screws to hold it in place. So now we can attach the mounting plate onto the assembled swivel bracket with another bolt, nut, and two washer pieces. Once you decide what position you want it in, you can use the included wrench and a pair of pliers or another wrench to tighten the bolt in place. And once you have your sub all set up the way you want it, you can connect your sub to your amp like we showed you before and run your wires through your ceiling or wall for a nice clean look. So hopefully this showed you guys how easy it is to set up your CT80 8-inch 70 volt commercial subwoofer. But of course, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to reach out to our customer support team through phone or email. As always guys, I'm Perry from Rockville, and we'll see you next time.